You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to thewritingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to Friday night chat show. I'm very glad that you are here. Please like and share this around if you're watching live. We very much appreciate it. But welcome, grab a drink. We've got a great show for you today and a great guest. So please enjoy. So very rusty start there for me. See, Agate does a lot of the brains behind and I just do the talking and the drinking. But thank you so much for obviously joining us live tonight. We've got an absolutely fantastic guest. Hello to you, Brandon, in the chat, and hello to you, Linda, as well. Like I said before, please like and share this to all your social networking sites. That definitely helps us out. And you can do that now, apparently. You can share to all different social media platforms. So that's absolutely fantastic. Now, Agate's away, and whilst Agate's away, the Creaseys will play. And tonight we do have a guest with the same name as me and Agate, which is fantastic. But unfortunately, the three Creaseys were not meant to be on tonight's show. But yeah, Chris is getting ready and prepared to go to Harrogate next week. Exactly the same as our guest tonight. Lots of people heading over to Harrogate. Unfortunately, I can't make it for work commitments, but Chris is going to have an absolute fantastic time. He's already speaking to some brilliant guests out there, friends of the show, people that we've had on. Lots of people that are going to be stepping in for that co-host role with him, and it's going to be fantastic. Some of the authors that he's got have been brilliant, and we've had them on the show, we've chatted to them, and they're going to step in and they're going to, get involved with the interview process and get involved with helping him out in the production side. So it's going to be absolutely fantastic, and I'm gutted not to be going, but please check out that show because we're going to put lots of different things in and around Harrogate live. We'll do little things like this, and maybe if you're feeling a bit left out like I am, we might do a show on Saturday that we can connect with Agate a little bit and we can still feel the atmosphere of Harrogate. But I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to introduce tonight's guest. So I've actually got somebody to speak to rather than me just ranting on. So if you've not seen, obviously, all the advertisements that we've done already, you'll know that tonight's guest is a fantastic author. He's an Australian crime writer and journalist. He's an author of the Martin Scarsden series of novels that have been bestsellers in several countries. So Hammer's worked for over 30 years, and he's had a career as a journalist and worked for the Bulletin, Fairfax, and on CBS program Dateline, which is pretty interesting. When writing his crime novels, he allows the story to develop rather than plotting it out in advance, and we'll definitely get into that in terms of how he does that. So there'll be lots of writing advice, so please stay tuned for that. He's won the ACT Book of the Year in 2011 for his non-fiction book, The River, and his first novel, Scrublands, won the John Creasey Award in the UK Crime Writers Association Dagger Awards in 2019. So absolutely fantastic credentials there. And obviously you get to stick around and ask your own questions towards the latter part of the show, but I'm sure you're going to pick up some absolutely fantastic writing advice from tonight's author. So without further ado, let's get him on. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Hammer.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing, Chris? You okay?
I'm surviving. I should warn the audience. I've just arrived in London. I got in yesterday and my body clock is telling me it's 4 o'clock in the morning. So if I start vaguing out a bit, it's me and it's that. It's not you.
Wow. We've never had somebody fall asleep on the show, but there's a first time for everything, so you never know. But yeah, lots of people saying hello in the chat. I've heard somewhere as well that it's really good when you get to a new time zone to take shoes and socks off, get out on some grass and just let your feet feel the earth beneath you. Apparently that helps. Don't know if you ever tried that, Chris, but apparently it works.
Okay, no, I might give that a go.
Yeah. So why are you in London at the minute? What have you got planned?
Well, I've been invited to appear at Harrogate in a session with S.A. Cosby. Sean Cosby is a US crime writer, author of Razorblade Tears and Blacktop Wasteland. Great Southern noir
brilliant
books.
books. Yeah.
So I've been to Harrogate before. You know, it's a brilliant crime fiction festival. So if you haven't been there, it's a great place to go because it is very social and there's a lot of mingling there. There's a big beer tent and the authors are there and the readers are there and there's no real social barriers or whatever. So it's a really good place to go and meet people and meet authors. So I was invited to that, so I've come over. I am doing a couple of events in London, one with Sean at Waterstones and Trafalgar Square, and another one with Emma Stiles, an expat Australian writer living in London. That's at Waterstones in Wimbledon, just after Harrogate.
Brilliant. That sounds absolutely fantastic. So if you are heading out to Harrogate, obviously you can see our very own Chris Haggett, but you can also see lots of fantastic authors like Chris. And my experience, I went not last year, the year before, and it was fantastic. Some of the most famous authors that you'll ever see just sat there having a drink and very close and, you know, very interactive. You know, you can ask them questions if you feel brave enough. And what I found is that they were very approachable and, you know, very nice and welcoming and warm. And if you get to speak to the right ones, they have drinks stashed away in their bags. So you might get a drink or two. That's not true. That's a lie. Harrogate crime writing organization people may have ruined the event for some people. But yes, let's retract that statement. Nobody has alcohol in their bags. Of course, they buy it from the bars. But I think I'm going to shut up now and we're going to go into the first part of the show before I get banned from Harrogate from all the writers that are going. And I'm going to play a little video and then we're going to get into the first part of the show. So as you can see from the video, Chris, the first part of the show is the road to writing. So can you please tell us like how you got into writing fiction in the first place and where that passion stems from?
I think I always had a hankering to do some writing. I tried to write a novel in my 20s, a truly appalling piece of work sitting in a bottom drawer somewhere. It's only more recently, as I've met a lot of very successful authors, that I realized that's a really common story. You know, everyone's got one, and a lot of people have two or three or four, you know, the books that didn't work when they're learning their craft. But I took it as just a sign that I couldn't write. And so I became a journalist, which meant that I did do a lot of writing. I was a journalist for about 30 years. At one point, I had an opportunity to write some non-fiction books, a little bit like travel writing. They call it narrative non-fiction. So you are telling a story. It's not an essay or a recitation of facts. You know, you travel and you be impressionistic about it. And that I was in my 50s then, and it taught me, well, my late 40s, and it taught me three things. One, I could actually write a book because until you do it, it seems like you're trying to climb Everest or something. More surprisingly, I found that I really liked writing books. I liked the whole process. I think I'd always liked the idea of being an author. I just wasn't so keen on all the hard work involved. You know, but by this stage, I found I really liked it. Then the third thing I learned, unfortunately, is it's really hard to make money out of writing books. You know, Australia's a small market, smaller than the UK, but I don't think it matters where you are. It's hard to make a living. And so I had to go back and get a real job again. So I returned to journalism. But I missed that writing, the sort of long form writing. and I didn't have the time or the resources to do non-fiction. So I thought I'll try my hand at making something up. And through various reasons, I decided to try my hand at crime fiction. It wasn't necessarily my go-to reading. I've always liked good crime. I always like those old sort of Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett type books, those sort of hard-boiled detectives. But more importantly, my writing teacher back when I was studying journalism, when I was 20, 21, was a guy called Peter Temple in Australia, South African originally. And he later became a very successful crime writer. He wrote the Jack Irish books that were turned into TV series with Guy Pearce as a star. I'm sure they've been on TV here. And he was the first Australian to win the UK Crime Writers Association Gold Dagger. And he also won Australia's premier literary prize, the Miles Franklin, which is, normally genre writers don't win those sort of major literary prize. Yeah. And he showed that you could write crime books that were more than crime books, that kind of transcended the genre because they delved into, the human condition and psychology, all that. So that's it. I thought I'm going to try my hand at this. And I spent about 5 years writing the book that eventually became Scrublands. I was learning on the job. I threw out hundreds of thousands of words because I didn't know what I was doing. But in the end, I got there, and I was very fortunate because Scrublands is a book set. It's a murder mystery set in a drought-stricken, isolated town in Australia. And just as I was finishing it and presenting it to an agent, Jane Harper's book, The Dry, had come out and been this massive success, not just in Australia, but here in the US, wherever. So there were a lot of publishers, so if you like, clamoring for my work, which part of it, I hope, was because the book had some merit, but also I think right place, right time. And almost overnight, I got a series of remarkable book deals and could quit my day job and become a full-time writer. And that's a very privileged place to be.
How is it different then from being paid to be a journalist? And I mean, I don't know too much about the journalism field, but I assume that you get given sort of like daily assignments or weekly assignments in terms of this is what we need from you this week, to writing fiction where you're very much managing yourself. Like, I mean, I'm a novice in the journalism area. So can you enlighten us to how they're different and how your processes are different in both?
Yeah, I find writing fiction just so much more liberating. I don't have to worry about getting sued for defamation or being held in contempt of court or parliament. I don't have to protect sources. And I can resolve stories. I can give stories a satisfying ending. I was very fortunate in my career as a journalist. I had jobs where I really did run my own show. I had 2 long stints as a roving foreign correspondent, and I'd go away for a month or so with a camera crew or pick up a crew or film my own stories and go completely off grid. It's kind of mad to think back on it, but yeah, I reported from more than 30 countries on 6 continents, many of them several times. So I was very fortunate. It was a great career. But what would I prefer to be doing now? Writing fiction. I am kind of living the dream. I just get to make stuff up and have a great time doing it. It appeals to my personality. I quite like it when I go and isolate myself for a week and don't talk to anyone and just lose myself in the work. And then I really enjoy this side of it. and going to places like Harrogate and getting to hang out with fellow authors and have a drink and a talk, and it's a great life if you can crack it.
So Chris, talk us through that process. Obviously you're saying about throwing out hundreds of thousands of words, and a lot of people that watch this show are aspiring authors as well, and they would be horrified at the process of going, do you know what, those 100,000 words or so, they don't fit what I'm trying to do. I'm going to chuck them away and start anew. So I suppose my question is, how did you navigate that process and find your rhythm and find that manuscript that you're after?
I think, look, part of it is one of the benefits of being a journalist is you get used to being edited and you realize that stuff needs to get chucked out. Some aspiring authors get very close, kind of protective of their work, and you can understand why. People are pouring their heart and soul into this story. And then they present it to an agent or a publisher, goes, no, lose this, get rid of this, that sort of thing. And it's like, no, it's my, it's like my child. But for the most part, what they're going to tell you, they want your book to be better. So you really have to listen to them. Doesn't mean you can't push back, but it will benefit the work in the long term. I think one skill that many successful writers have in common, though, is an ability to self-critique, to look at their own work and see what's not working in it. It can be very difficult at times, and that's why it's good when you can work with good editors. But I think it's an important skill to have. Now, hopefully I'm getting better at it. With Dead Man's Creek, right at the end, I did do a big rewrite. There's 3 point of view characters, and one of the points of view I really did almost completely rewrite during the so-called structural edit. But I think I'm getting better at it. I've been writing a book a year since Scrublands was published in 2018, and my books tend to be quite long. 120,000 words, something like that. So hopefully I'm getting better at that. I think one thing maybe I do now is if I'm going to chuck something out, I do it at an earlier stage rather than completely polishing it, rewriting it 3 or 4 times, getting it just right, and then throwing it away. I mean, that's madness.
Yeah, so one of the things that fascinates a lot of people that listen and watch this show is the actual, you said you were living the dream, but what's the actual daily routine like now? Like, what's your typical day?
Okay, so it actually builds up during the year. So I'm doing a book a year. So in the early stages, I pretty much write every day. And people admire that and say, wow, that shows self-discipline. Now, of course, I'm lucky I don't have a full-time job and my kids are grown up. So I don't really have any other responsibilities. But rather than self-discipline, it's just the fact, I think I'm addicted to it. I love doing it. A bit like being a gym junkie or having your morning cup of coffee, whatever. If you don't do it, you don't kind of feel right.
Yeah.
So early in the book, I'll try that, but after 3 or 4 hours, I just run out of steam. I'll walk up until lunchtime. In the afternoon, so I'll be just doing the housework or the shopping or exercise. Exercise is important because it is a sedentary job. But often I'll be thinking as I'm riding my bike or walking, swimming, whatever I'm doing. It's often when the best ideas come.
Yeah.
Then as the year builds up, until I really finish the first draft, I don't really have a good idea where the book is, what the shape of it's going to be. But then when I'm there and it's building up, it almost starts to consume me a bit. So there's less and less sort of mental downtime, even if I'm only looking at the screen up until lunchtime. The characters' motivations are rolling around in my head. So it builds up. And then my typical schedule is to deliver a manuscript, say at the end of February,
Right.
and then to finish editing around now. So I'm on the last kind of proof edit at the moment, and which I hope to finish tomorrow. So my daughter's here in London with me, so hopefully we can go out and have a good celebration.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I think it's one of those things that a lot of people like who are aspiring authors and stuff, they think, oh, it must be great to have all this sort of free time to write and things like that. But I don't think they appreciate just how difficult it is to have that discipline and to sit down and to write on a regular basis. Well, I suppose my question is, a lot of people struggle with writer's block and they struggle to fit the time in if they're doing other things. So what advice would you give to people who are, one, struggling to fit the time in to write? Because that's one of the things that a lot of people talk about in and around the show. And two, like, what do you do when the words aren't flowing?
Well, the first thing to think about that finding time to write, you might look at me and say, oh, it's okay for him because he can do it full time. But pretty much every author, all those multi-million-dollar, million copy selling authors, all started the same way. As I said, often the book in the bottom drawer, the unpublished, maybe 2 or 3 or 4. And all of them, family responsibilities, day jobs, working late at night on their books, stolen hours on weekends. So we've all done it, right?
Yeah.
And I think part of it is you've got to want to do it. I mean, and if you do want to do it, you'll find a way.
Yeah.
I was going to say something else there. Oh, the other thing too, I think, just alluding back to a question you asked earlier, Chris, about, how many, so the audience would find it, scary or, confronting to throw out hundreds of thousands of words.
Yeah.
Part of it is the way you look at, I think because I was the same, you kind of dream of writing this wonderful book, this breakthrough book, the be-all and end-all sort of book, and it'll win prizes and you'll be successful and all of that. But that's really not the joy of writing. The joy of writing is seeing it as a continuing process. I mean, I really hope that I'm a better writer now than when Scrublands came out 5 years ago. So I'm just, this is my 6th fiction book I'm polishing now. And my aspiration is to continue to improve and get better. So it's a process and a journey rather than just trying to write that one book.
Yeah. So when you win awards and your writing is really successful on a commercial scale, does that add additional pressure when you then go back to the drawing board with the next book?
Look, it does to a sense. On the other hand, though, I've managed to pull it off, 6 times now. I'm very happy with this latest book. It'll be out in the UK in January, called Cover the Bones. And all my books aren't based. Some authors write a book and it's really very much their life story, for example. And maybe it's taken them years to write, and then the publisher turns around and says, oh, can we have another one next year? That can be really tough. Yeah. But all my books are totally fictional. I've just made them up. Maybe I've different things have solidified in my mind from my own experiences or whatever, but they are, fabrications. And so having done it before, I figure, well, I'll try it again. I suspect what's going to happen is 1 year, as I'm writing the book, instead of everything coming together, it'll just fly apart, at which point I'll have to, ring up the publisher and say, look, it's just not working. We won't have a book this year. But, that's not a terrible outcome. That just means you need more time to finish the book. It's not, it's not life and death.
Yeah. No, definitely. I'm really fascinated by the transition from obviously being a journalist to then writing fiction. Like, again, I'm not an expert in journalism, but I'm guessing there's a certain amount of storytelling within journalism. And I don't mean storytellers in creating fiction, but I mean, obviously, holding the reader's attention long enough for them to finish the article type thing. So was that a really good base for you writing fiction, or are they two completely separate entities that you've had to learn and approach them in different ways?
Look, there's a couple of benefits that come from being a journalist, and there's a couple of impediments, if you like. One of the benefits is you get used to and appreciate being edited. You're not too precious about it. Another one is the attitude to writing. Some writers, you referred earlier about, you get writer's block and how do you work through it. You don't have that choice if you're a journalist. You can't ring up your editor and say, hey, I'm not feeling very inspired. I'm not going to file everything you need to say, right? Because you get sacked. And this has flowed through as a benefit into my fiction writing. And what I've learned is writing doesn't come from inspiration. Inspiration comes from writing. So I'll sit down, I've had a big night, I'm not feeling very well, I really don't want to do it, but I'll write away, and then half an hour in, the inspiration starts to flow and the words start to flow, and lo and behold, 3 or 4 hours later, I'm sitting back going, wow, that's pretty good. Where did that come from? So that's something I've learned, if you like, from journalism. The downside is a lot of journalism isn't telling a story. It's reciting a series of facts. And the typical news story starts with the most important fact up the top, the second most important fact next, the third next, then a bit of background, and the bottom written, knowing that a sub-editor might chop it off. I was fortunate in I did a lot of long-form journalism, like magazine features, and also long-form television stories. So I'm talking, 30, 40 minutes, like almost like documentaries. And in that, you really do have to, tell a story, and you have to be able to lead the viewer through it, but also keep their attention all the way through it. So I think that I'm sure I benefited from that. But, a lot of journalists, there are a lot of really good crime writers who are former journalists. So, in Australia, there's Jane Harper, there's Michael Robotham, former journalist. Val McDermott, Michael Connolly, of course. But I have friends who can't make the transition, and part of the reason is journalism uses a kind of hackneyed shorthand, which is very effective in communicating ideas, but comes across in a book as just kind of like doggerel. So, as I say, there's benefits from being a journalist, but there's also impediments.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's fascinating. Like you say, there's so many successful people that have made that transition from journalism to fiction writing. Some brilliant authors that you mentioned there. We're almost... Yeah, definitely. Michael Connolly is one of my favorite authors ever. And he, again, same route. But we're halfway through the show, so we're going to move on to the next stage, which is what's the story? And what we do, Chris, here is we ask all our authors to give us their elevator pitch. So I'm going to play a quick video, and then if you could give us your elevator pitch for Dead Man's Creek, that would be fantastic. So no pressure. I'll just play this little video because it does help with the editing. But what's the story?
Okay, this is the elevator pitch for Dead Man's Creek. It's kind of tricky because I've got my mind really in the next book. And also it's a kind of tricky one to give an elevator pitch for. I'll give you a kind of a prologue. We're in a forest late at night. This is a real place, the Barmah-Millewa Forest in Australia, the world's largest river red gum forest on the Murray River between New South Wales and Victoria. It's late at night, it's winter, there's no one there. We're with a woman, an unnamed woman. She's intent on blowing up a small dam which is preventing water to flow into the forest, to nourish the forest. Not far away, a young man is running for his life. He's being hunted by men with guns. They're not far from each other, this man and this woman, but they don't know each other as there, although the woman can hear gunshots and the man hears an explosion. That's a setup. And then the story proper begins some months later with these two homicide detectives, Nell Buchanan and Ivan Lucic, who we first met in Opal Country, my first book of that series. Nell's not very happy with this case because a body has been found at the bottom of his regulator, blown up by the woman in the forest. But she figures it's going to be a cold case. The body could have been there for decades. It's just skeletal remains. But she's also not happy because this is where she grew up. And as more bodies start appearing in the forest and Ivan and Nell find themselves in real danger, the whole situation becomes more fraught because Nell begins to suspect members of her own family are implicated in these killings. So that's one part of the elevator pitch. But there's another bit to it, and that is there's actually 3 different timelines in this book with 3 different points of view. There's Nell Buchanan, the homicide detective in the present. There's a story set in 1973, a teenage girl who lives just near the forest, but it's a very different forest for her. And then there's a story of an 11-year-old boy called Jimmy. During the Second World War, there's a severe drought and he's tasked with taking the family's cattle into the forest where there's food and water. And he has to camp in there and live with the cattle, so again in the forest. And these 3 stories start off being completely separate. But as the book progresses, the readers start seeing the connections between the 3 stories until by the end it's almost like the fate of these 3 characters has collided over time. How's that, Chris? Does that work? I'm sorry, I've lost your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, right. Brilliant. Yeah. Sorry, Chris. I don't know what's happened there. Like I said, I'm not the expert on the programming front. I'm normally the questions guy. But no, fantastic concept and a great elevator pitch. My question off the back of that is, as an author, how do you possibly navigate, as someone who is very character driven and, will just allow the characters to propel the story? How do you navigate the process of creating a novel where you've got 3 different points of view and different timelines, all in the same mix of each other?
Yeah, it's tricky, and I really don't think I could have written that book as my first book. I think it relies on some of the skills that I've picked up in the previous books.
Yeah.
The first couple, Scrublands and Silver, were pretty much from one point of view, the journalist Martin Scarsden. The third book in that series alternates points of view between Martin and his girlfriend Mandalay Blonde. But Dead Man's Creek is more complicated again. And I am a pantser as opposed to a plotter. I'm sure your audience is familiar with those terms, that the plotters plot things out in advance. I write by the seat of my pants. I typically start with an idea of a setting, typically in regional Australia. My third book, Trust, is set in Sydney, but generally in isolated areas.
Yeah.
I start with a setting and a kind of an idea, and it builds from there. The book I'm just finishing now, the one that will be out in January, Cover the Bones, I started with a couple of characters and it wasn't working, so I had to swap points of view. So it's just a matter of working through it, and that's why I referred to it before. Until I've got that first draft done, I don't really have an idea of the overall shape of the book. And so what I do, typically by the time the book gets to the publisher, I've gone through 5 or 6 drafts, trying to refine it, trying to hone it, trying to get the pacing right, trying to get the characters right, the motivation. So it's, if you like, it's a kind of layering technique. I try and get a foundation, then I polish it, then I put another layer on. And so by the end, it hopefully it's quite a complex structure, but it's not for the reader, that the reader can simply read it and enjoy it and, come along for the ride. I guess what I'm trying to do is build a world and invite the reader in. So I want a good plot. I want good characters. I want a good setting. I want good pacing. I want nice writing. All of that. And if you get it, if you get it right, they support each other. So the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts. And you construct this world where the reader can come in and watch as the play unfolds before them.
Yeah, I love that. That's a fantastic concept of, engaging with the reader and the writing process and what you're trying to achieve during that as well. I love that. Do you think, on a personal level, obviously you talked about your first novel, but then how Dead Man's Creek sort of elevated in terms of complexity, in terms of different points of view and things like that. Do you think that's your desire to keep pushing yourself as an author, or has that been something that's just happened organically in your writing and, you didn't really expect it or plan for it, it just happened?
Yeah, a bit of both, I think. It has kind of evolved, I think, rather naturally. On the other hand, I think I'd be frustrated if I was just writing the same book again and again. If I was just rehashing Scrublands, in a slightly different setting with a slightly different plot, that I wasn't trying new things. And, I'm, as I said, I'm sure it'll come a time when I try something new and it won't work, and I won't have a book that year. But I think it is necessary to try new things, and often it's not like, oh, I want to try something new. What will I try? It's more as I'm writing one book, an idea for a next book comes along, a different concept, something to do. So it's an organic process rather than a deliberative one.
One of the things that really strikes me about a lot of legends of the crime fiction genre is that they get a really good character that the readers are invested in, and then they do, like Michael Connelly, for example. Obviously you mentioned him before. The Harry Bosch season, I forget how many novels he's actually in, but it's over 20 novels with the same character. Ian Rankin, the same with Rebus. So many fantastic stories with Rebus. Have you been tempted to attempt the same sort of I say structure, because there must be some element of structure to it, in terms of you've got a fantastic character that you're going to propel into a whole series. Has a character presented themselves to you when you've been writing that you think, do you know what, I could go on forever with this character?
No. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
When I was writing Scrublands, that very exploratory, can I do this or not sort of thing, I was convinced that for a crime book, the plot was the be all and end all. Now I think differently. As I said, it's all those different elements combined. But one thing in writing Scrublands that really surprised me and which pleased me, and I think resonated with the readers, is Martin Scarsden has got real emotional skin in the game. And he changes. He goes on a personal journey during that book. So the Martin Scarsden at the end of the book is very different from the man at the beginning of the book. And I like that. And so that then suggested the next book in the series where, unlike Scrublands, where he knows no one, has never been there before, he returns to his old hometown and is forced to confront his past and the traumatic events of his childhood. And then that in turn suggested, oh, well, what about his partner, Mandalay Blonde? So I did that. But after the third book, having had such a personal stories involved with the crime plot, if you like, interwoven with it, thought, where do I take these characters now? Thinking up crime plots, that's easy or relatively easy. But where will I take them on their personal stories? So that's when I thought, look, I'll give them a break and I'll go and write a standalone. And that's the book that became Opal Country. But the same thing then happened. You have these two homicide detectives, Ivan Lucic and Nell Buchanan, and they're in this opal mining town in the outback. But then I became interested, and certainly they've got skin in the game in that book, but then I became interested in them. So this latest book, it's just about to come out in paperback here, Dead Man's Creek, is very much involved with Nell's personal story, her family story, her parents, her siblings, etc. So I'd find it difficult to have them so emotionally involved in these stories, then to take them along in a series, in another book in the series where they're simply that sort of removed type of investigator, a Miss Marple or a Poirot, where you can just, fantastic books, but you can just keep them going for book after book because they're not that emotionally involved in the case. But what I have done is, so there's 3 Martin Scarsden books, and now there's about to be 3 Ivan and Nell books. But what I have done, and this is a little bit like Michael Connelly, is that they inhabit the same universe, contemporary Australia. So there are times in the Ivan and Nell books, Ivan is a minor character in the 3 Martin Scarsden books. Martin appears in the Nell and Ivan books. If I need a journalist, why would I invent a new one when there's a perfectly good one there? And it's what Michael Connelly does. So you have the Bosch books and the Mickey Haller books and the Jack McAvoy books. And say in a Jack McAvoy book, Bosch will be there as a minor character, doing a cameo, or Mickey Haller will be. So it's a bit of a universe. So in a way, maybe I'm not always following the same character, but it's kind of in the same world with the same kind of feel to it.
So on that note then, in terms of obviously creating a fantastic universe there, is there a character that's way off in the distance that you see and you're like, I'm going to write about you at some point because you are fascinating in my mind?
Yeah, so in that, there's some recurring characters. So there's this con man type of character in Scrublands called Harley Snout. So I think he might come back. There's a great character in Trust, Henry Livingston. I'd love to bring him back, but unfortunately, that's not possible. Don't want to give away too many spoilers, but if you read it, you'll know why. Yeah, sure. But that idea of bringing back characters, or one thing that does happen in writing the books internally is Ivan or Nell or Martin, they'll have to find something out to get the plot, just to drive the plot forward. And maybe they can find something in an archive or an old newspaper clipping, but typically they'll meet someone who tells them something. Now, in writing that person that begins as a plot point, why wouldn't you try and make them interesting, intriguing or mysterious or comical or sinister, whatever? And sometimes they take on a life of their own. So that happened in Scrublands. Definitely happened in Opal Country. These characters appear early in the book, and then later in the book, I bring them back, and it becomes evident they're playing a much more important role in the story. So that's happening within books. Why wouldn't you do that, across the series?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right there. I think it's a brilliant concept in terms of creating a universe and, living and breathing as an author within that universe and seeing who raises their head, in a sense. That's fantastic. We're going to move on to the next part of the show. So people watching now, if you've got questions for Chris, please send them in. I'm going to play a short video in a minute that will lead on to the right community question element. And we have a couple of staple questions that we always ask, but it's your opportunity to ask questions now as well. So please send them in and we'll do our best to get through them. But again, I'll just play a little video, which is community questions. So, Chris, the first question that we have that's a sort of staple chat show question is, if you could take any character from fiction, who would you take and what would you do with that character?
Yeah, I don't know. I just saw these questions today. I reckon it depends whether you think it's fictional or not. I reckon Hunter S. Thompson would be an interesting person to, particularly like in a crime genre type book, to use
definitely.
them. Do you mean take a character and put them in a book, or just take a character and hang out with them?
Yeah, I mean, the origin of this question comes from, I actually met Michael Connolly at a signing in England when he came over, and I actually asked him the same question, and I thought he said, "Oh, that's such a great question." So I thought we'd ask it to everyone on the show, but it's take a character from fiction and write that character in your own style. So he actually said, "I'd take Harry Potter," and he said, "The reason I take Harry Potter is because it's worth a hell of a lot of money." So that's what I would do. But yeah, take a character from fiction and do what you want with that character in a narrative or a novel or something like that.
Yeah, I think Hunter S. Thompson would be. Yeah. I mean, I know he's not a fictional character, but I think in many ways he is a fictional character. I think the real Hunter S. Thompson was probably not nearly as interesting, but the kind of persona he created about himself, not just outrageously on the edge, but also observant and witty and comical and sort of political and all the rest of it. So that might be one.
No, I think you're right. I think it's about time we had a fictional novel about Hunter S. Thompson, because that would be good. Next question that we have, I'm going to sort of send them through as a bit of a quick fire, but if you could change the ending to any fictional story, whether it be TV, film, or books, which ending would you change and what would you do?
Well, I wouldn't, because endings are really important. That they often stay with you, right? So the books that you really remember, the books you really love, is because they've got the ending right. Even if it's a sad ending or a terrible ending, that's what makes the book. But what I would really love to do is change the endings of some real life authors. Those authors who never got to see the success of their work. Something of people like, Edgar Allan Poe or the Confederacy of Dunces guy,
Yeah.
John Kennedy Toole, or, in the crime fiction thing, Stieg Larsson, the millennial novels, like massive international bestsellers. But of course, they were published, posthumously. And the list goes on, with the Brontes, Chatterton, artists like Van Gogh, these people who never saw, did all that hard work, created very memorable pieces, and yet never got to witness that. So I know it's not quite the question, but those are the endings I would really love to be able to change.
That is my favorite answer that we've had in that scenario. I love the idea of Edgar Allan Poe coming back and just seeing how much of an impact he's had. And, like you said, Larson as well, I always, when I think of his stories and the girl with the dragon tattoo and the fact that he didn't get to see the success he had, like, I know as writers, we don't necessarily write for that acclaim or for that fame, but just how much of an impact he had with his writing, just to be able to get a glimpse of that would have been fantastic. So yeah, I love that answer. It's brilliant. One of the things that we've been asking recently that's become more of a staple question this season is, obviously we're on YouTube. Obviously this interview will probably outlive us. It'll probably be on the internet hundreds of years time. But if somebody was to take over your body of work and inherit all your characters and all of your stories, what would your advice be to them? What would you want them to do?
Well, this has just happened to me.
Wow.
And it happens to, not a lot of authors, but, enough. And that is, they've just finished filming a TV series based on Scrublands. And so the choice there is, do you try and get involved? Do you try and protect it? Or do you go, you take what I've written and change it any way you like, recreate it, make something better out of this? And so that, and that's pretty much what's happened with the TV series. I mean, it's a great production company, great writers, all the rest. I mean, that's what I would say if someone was to take over my books or whatever. I'd say, make it your own, but please don't try and be respectful or whatever. Take it and run with it.
Wow. So, as somebody obviously who wrote the novel that has inspired a whole TV series, are you excited by that prospect to watch it, or is that something that you just put to the back of your mind and you're like, I've done with that story, I'm moving on to different things?
Oh no, I'm going to really enjoy watching it. I do know that they have quite changed. What's only told is a kind of a backstory in the book. They've recreated and filmed and cast the characters and whatever. So no, I think I'll really enjoy it. It's a really good team. I think it'll do well. I'm sure it will be. It's sold in the US, but I know a number of different outlets here in the UK are interested in it. It's just gone into post-production, which is good. It should be finished by the end of the year.
Nice. No, looking forward to watching that. And one of the final questions that we have before we go into the community questions, because there are questions coming in, and please keep obviously sending your questions in for Chris as well. But our final sort of staple question is a bit of a morbid one, but you're on your deathbed and you're looking back at your writing career. What would you be happy with? What is success to you?
Look, it's not sales and it's not prizes. It's really what I've got now, and that is the opportunity to write full time. It's not to be taken for granted. I know in Australia, I'm sure it's the same in the UK, most published authors don't make enough money to be able to do it full time. And I'm in the position where I can. It's a great gift, it's a great privilege, and I'm determined to make the most of it. But for me, that is success, to being able to do what I love and do it full time.
Yeah. Again, brilliant answer. So we've got some questions coming in from the community. Obviously, please keep sending them in. Anya, thank you for your question. So Anya Pavil says, is there such a thing as the perfect crime?
Well, I hope not, because you need to be able to solve them. I mean, imagine if I wrote a book that had a perfect crime in it, and you read the book, and by the end, you don't know who's done it. So in the sense of crime fiction, you can't have a perfect crime, or you don't want a perfect crime. Now, in real life, of course, there are, depends on your definition of perfect, but there are so many unsolved crimes. There are some very famous homicides that I know in Australia where the killers have never been identified, never been caught. And I don't think that it's because they were particularly clever or cunning or, in that, mastermind type of fashion. It's just that they got away with it. There wasn't a witness there, or the cops were lazy, or someone got bought off, or whatever. So from my point of view, that's not really perfect. But from a crime fiction author, you can never have a perfect crime, because by the end of the book, you've got to be able to reveal to the reader who done it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, last time I went to Harrogate, I remember Nadine Matheson, and Chris, obviously you go in so you can ask her, but she's a crime author as well. She writes some brilliant novels, and I can't remember at this moment in time what her involvement in the police was. I don't know if she was a police officer, if she was a detective, or if she was a lawyer. I'm leaning towards lawyer. But I remember her saying, there are 3 ways to commit the perfect crime. However, I cannot write about them because I don't want to inform people that is a way to commit the perfect sort of crime in that sense. But that just stayed with me. I was fascinated by that there's 3 ways that are surefire ways to get the job done if you're committing a crime. However, I'm not talking about them, is what she said. But maybe you can get her to elaborate on that. No, it was fascinating. Halo, thank you for your question. So Halo says, what is the worst character you've ever read, and how would you write them better?
Oh, okay. So you mean worst as worst written character? Is that what it means?
Yeah. It could be the worst as in the most evil. I think both answers are interesting in terms of the worst character that you've read. I think every author has that character that they read and they think either the author who's wrote them has done them a disservice, and I could probably give them a new sense of purpose and a new life, or maybe it's just they're downright evil. And what would you do?
I have read so in the crime genre, I'm not really an action thriller type reader, but I look at someone like Lee Childs, and they've really kind of mastered that, right? But there's a lot of imitations of that just they kind of don't work. They're like, and I've read a couple of those, and I just thought, oh no, it's kind of like fan fiction that just doesn't quite get there. So I'm not being polite. I'd name them if I could remember the names, but I can't, and that's the problem. They're forgettable. A really good character can really make a book. And we talked about Stieg Larsson before. That first book, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I read it years ago now. To be honest, I can't remember the plot. I've got some sort of vague idea. But can I remember the characters? Oh, yeah, you bet I can. And I think, particularly the girl, Elizabeth, you really remember that. So, but what makes a character, compelling is an interesting idea. I think to some degree, as a reader, you need to be able to identify with them, even if they're kind of despicable or evil or whatever. You've got to be able to don't get on the same wavelength.
So, Chris, I asked this question earlier in the week, and I'm going to ask it to you, and it's not necessarily a staple question, but I feel like it should be. The world is about to explode, and there is a little orb that you can put one of your novels in that is going to guarantee it's going to hit every other galaxy in the universe. And if there's life there, then there's life, and they'll read it. Which novel are you going to pick from the ones that you've written, and why?
The next one. Because it always has to be the next one. What's your favorite book? The one you're writing now, the one that you're pouring your heart and your soul and your thought and your time into. I'm very proud of my previous books, but for me, it's the future books. It's not the ones in the past. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love it. And the final question before we go, Chris, is where can people who are watching this live and are watching it back, obviously on YouTube and maybe listening to it, where can they find information about you, and where can they buy your books?
Okay, I think you can. All of my books are available in the UK. They should be pretty easy to find. I have a website. It's chrishammerauthor.com. Just Google me. I'm sure you'll find it. I have a Facebook author page, and I'm on Instagram. I do have a Twitter handle, but it's really a relic from when I was a journalist. I really don't use Twitter that much. I find it too estroperous. So yeah, chrishammerauthor.com or Chris Hammer Author on Facebook, or I think I'm the Hammer now Instagram.
Brilliant. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. I hope, Chris, obviously you have a brilliant time at Harrogate. I'm so glad that you've come over to the UK to experience that. And, you know, if you are going to Harrogate and you're watching this, please say hello to Chris. I'm sure you'll appreciate it.
But I'll be in the beer tent.
Yeah, we'll send Dagger to find you. I'm sure he'll have a bit of a chat with you. He's a small Welsh one, probably who's very drunk. He'll hate me for saying that, but I said it anyway. But from us, the Writing Community Chat Show, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you tonight, Chris. So thank you very much. And to those of you who are watching, we are actually taking a little bit of a break now. Obviously, Agate will be at Harrogate next week, but we're not back until I think it's the 28th. So we've got a bit of time. But please join us again, because we'll speak to another brilliant author. But Chris, thank you so much tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to pick your brains and to talk about writing with you. But for me, it's goodbye for now, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and good luck with the writing.